Anant Sood, welcome to the conversation today.
Hey, John. Pleasure to be here.
It's a real pleasure to be sitting down with you. You're joining us from Mumbai, India. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah, in the US. And today we're going to be talking about work, transitions in the workplace, how things have really shifted over the last decade or so, and how workflows have been designed and redesigned to accommodate those changes. And or like where are the gaps? Like how have we been missing the mark in the design of work as those changes have occurred. And I would argue that in many ways we have missed the mark and like we haven't fully redesigned work in order to accommodate those changes. So this is going to be a fun conversation as we explore this together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Anant's bio with everybody. Anant is a co-founder and oversees marketing and channel partnerships at worxogo. Prior to worxogo, he spent 18 years at Ernst& Young, PricewaterhouseCooper, and Opera Solutions across India, USA, and the Middle East and China. Most of Anant's career has been being part of startups, building and scaling teams, from being one of the first few employees in Opera's, the big data analytics company, to setting up the consulting practice for Ernst& Young in 2007 to worxogo. Workzogo, and at workzogo rather, and that helps building partnerships to drive sales through distribution, nurturing partnerships like Accenture, Microsoft, and many others. His time is also spent making workzogo's Nudge Coach more visible amongst enterprise customers with a one-of-a-kind newsletter going out to 3,000 plus across the world. It's really remarkable, all the cool things that you're doing. Annette, anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on into the conversation?
Sure. Nice to be here, John. And yeah, a couple of things. So first, the newsletter now is been going on for 8 years, and it's
Mhm.
now close to about 5,000 people across 14 countries.
Oh, that's great.
Most of most of these are business leaders who are interested in the area of behavior science and essentially applying it to their work context and to know how to manage teams. And yeah, in addition to that, we are now for the last 8 to 9 years in worksogo, working with some of the largest Fortune companies. So the amount of data and insight, we get literally a frontline view of seeing how the business leaders are, changing the way work gets done, both for themselves as for their team. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and yeah, having a big conversation.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that's incredible. The reach of the newsletter, all the cool stuff that you're doing. As I mentioned, as I was doing the introductions,
Mhm.
things have changed a lot over the last 10 years. Let's
Yes,
even just look at the last 5 years, right? Things have dramatically changed since the pandemic.
absolutely.
And yeah, maybe walk us through some of what you've seen in the work that you do at WorkZogo. How has how have things changed for the average everyday worker, say over the last 5 to 10 years, and what do workflows look like? How have those shifted over that time period?
All right. So, in fact, this is very interesting because I had a very similar conversation with a Fortune 10 leader literally 10 days ago. And one of the things that came out, this is one of North America's largest insurance companies. And what came out is there were three things, John, that stood out. Number one, pre-COVID, and it's weird, it feels like COVID was just recent, but it's been 6 years now. And the first thing that is, changed in the last 5 years is, 6, 7 years ago, hybrid or remote work felt like a perk. Now it's kind of baked into operating models of teams and organizations and team leaders and everyone, right? That's the first one. As a consequence, collaboration is no longer synchronous. You can't
Hmm.
just lean over your, desk, talk to your coworker, or have a chat at the water cooler during a break of some sorts. it's become asynchronous. So all our conversations, either it's with peers or with leaders or even with teams, people who are not in the same team, it's become async. That's the first
Mhm.
big change. The second one is the amount of demand, cognitive demand that this nature of work has changed is massive on the knowledge worker. We don't really see it in that way. But just as an example, if you look at any knowledge workers screen today, from 6 years ago, there's at least three times the number of systems or tools or apps that are either pinging or popping and distracting them, and that context switch that we've got to do is so much more. And that's the second one. Third, our attention spans have shortened. Now,
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, at work for sure, but even in our personal lives, I can count the number of times where in the evenings you have television on and you have a second screen in front of you while you're scrolling while something is happening, right? And that is something that we carry with us to work.
Yeah.
So so I think obviously there are lots more, but the three or four major ones: async, collaboration, hybrid, and remote is now part of the standard operating models. Information has just exploded purely just in the number of apps and distractions that we have on our screens, and our attention spans are just so much shorter now. We cannot sit through a 1.5 hour movie anymore without looking at our another screen at least X number of times. I'll leave that X for each of us
Yeah. Well, like
to
production
fill in.
companies have changed the way they write scripts and the way they produce shows and movies because they assume that people will have their phone scrolling while watching a show or a movie, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, I remember seeing one very recently, and I wrote about it last, I think 2 weeks ago. Matt Damon talks about the fact that Netflix now says the way you write your script, you need to have the big explosion up front in the first 5 minutes, as compared to when it was happening in the end. And you need to repeat the main plot points at least six times because we are not
Wow.
distracted. And that's kind of an input to how business leaders need to look at work for themselves and for their teams.
Yeah, it's interesting because communication in the workplace has always been challenging, right? So
Yeah,
let's say there's any change initiative, some new adoption, some new tech, whatever, right? Any
yeah,
change requires communication. Communication is hard. It's always been hard.
yeah,
But when you have fragmented attention, for all the reasons that you just mentioned, it becomes exponentially harder to communicate effectively, right? People are distracted. They're getting pinged through Slack channels and Teams messages and emails, and they're constantly getting distracted. And we have distributed teams, and so it's all asynchronous, and it's just harder and harder to reach people with the messages that you want to reach them with, and to cut through the noise. And
absolutely.
that's one of the key through points that I'm hearing from everything that you just said is it's just going to
Yeah,
be harder and harder for an intentional manager or leader as they're trying to lead a team that's async, that's distributed, that's distracted, to really hammer home like the core mission, the vision, the strategy, change initiatives, anything like that. All that's going to be so challenging in what is really a turbulent world, with more constant change happening all around us, with greater levels of competition, with constant technological disruption, with geopolitical, you know, disruption, like everything, right? Like it's just getting
yeah,
harder and harder.
absolutely. And and to add to this, you don't get to see your coworkers every day, right? So uh, and one of the very interesting things, John, that you mentioned is if you look at, and this is a study we just did recently, if you look at Zoom calls or team calls that are happening, now you have more AI note takers than actual humans on calls. And at the end of every call, you're going to get seven performance, the meeting summaries that come out saying this is what happened. No one follows up on it because that's still a human that's going to do it. And we just think we're being more productive. But that's that's one of the things that how do you ensure that that distraction can be reduced and more intentional work happens? So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Well, very good. So things are changing. The areas that you just described, I think everyone has experienced, especially post-pandemic.
Yep.
That's been the new reality for so many of us. Um, do you feel like workflows and the way work gets done, work design has really adapted to accommodate this new reality, these changes that have occurred?
So there are two chains of thought here. The answer, me personally, and at worxogo, we have a point of view, and we see business leaders having seem to fall into two distinct groups. The first one is, um, you know, we need to provide our teams with more information. So what they end up doing is a lot of tools and information that comes in that's available is literally the team is bombarded with it. So if you've noticed, let me take an insurance claims customer support agent, having a conversation with a customer. They'd get literally, these next best action recommended tools that come in. So every time you're making a call, there's a screen that's constantly feeding you information. So uh, that's one way that leaders are kind of thinking of making that change. The other side, which is the side we believe in at worksogo, is it's about ensuring that now because AI is going to do a lot of heavy lifting in terms of analysis and data crunching and all of that. From the change in the workflow, it's about
Mhm.
how do you ensure the individual's playbook is maintained. So as customers, I hate those IVR calls where I got to keep pressing #9 or zero or trying to figure out how to get to a human, right? So uh, so from a workflow perspective, there are two, and we are seeing this play out right now with a lot of companies and leaders. And
Mhm.
sticking to insurance right now, but specifically ones who say let AI do a lot of the heavy lifting and the automation and making the individual irrelevant. So it could be you or me having a conversation with the customer as part of a team. It doesn't really matter if it's you or me because there's a prompt that's literally telling me a script of what I need to say. The other chain of thought, which is the way workflow is changing, is saying each of us have our own playbooks, how we deal with customer situations.
Mhm.
And AI kind of becomes like a coach or complementing our abilities to become better versions of ourselves. And then that retains the quote unquote human element of the interaction with the customers. So we're seeing these two distinct groups of leaders, conversations, as well as how process design is changing in teams. Was that your question? I mean, does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
yeah, I think that helps. And I think you're right. Like it totally depends. It depends on the organization. It depends on the team, to
Yeah.
whether, process redesign has occurred, whether work redesign has happened, whether workflows have actually been adjusted to accommodate async, whether it's been adjusted to accommodate the constant bombardment of being pinged all day, with different notifications and all those sorts of things, all the things that you laid out. Um,
Yeah.
I suspect
Mhm.
that for the vast majority of workers, that their workflows, their general design of work has not largely been adjusted. Um,
Right.
over the last 5 years, say, to what it was pre-pandemic. And so for most people, I think, as I hear anecdotally, as well as in some of the research that I've done,
Mhm.
I think most people's work day to day is more or less designed and the workflows are very similar to how they've been uh,
Mhm.
for quite a while. Yet the reality of that work that has to get done has changed dramatically, and they're not
Correct.
terribly compatible, right? Um,
True.
for all the reasons that you said. And so we have this reckoning, I think. Um,
Yeah.
we have this new reality that is becoming harder and harder for people to reconcile it, to cope with. If you're in a workplace, if you're in a team where workflows haven't been adjusted, where your work um, hasn't been redesigned in such a way to accommodate, say, async or distributed teams or any, all these different things. If that hasn't occurred, it's just getting harder and harder for you to successfully do your job, right? And to collaborate with your
Absolutely.
people. If you're still operating under the same job design as you did pre-pandemic, but now you have to work with people all over the world in different time zones, asynchronously, or you're a manager and you're managing people who are never together, and you're trying to do it the same way you always did in the past. It's
Yeah.
it's it's going to be so hard. It's in some ways it's going to be
Yes.
almost impossible. And so it's just a reminder to folks that, at a fundamental level, as work shifts, as the nature of the workplace changes, so does work design, and so do workflows. And this has always been the case. This isn't new. I mean, this isn't just a pandemic thing. This isn't just an AI thing. This is
Correct.
this has always been the case. Every new innovation, every, industry, we're now, people say industry 5.0, but the industrial revolution, ever since the wheel, right? Like every time there's a new innovation, workflows shift and we have to
It
adjust
does.
and we have to change, and so we just have to make sure that we continue to adjust to be more effective. Let's talk a little bit more about AI. Specifically, there's so much fear about displacement. um,
Yeah.
and there's going to be task displacement. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
AI has become so good at doing so many things. And so the question becomes, is there going to be displacement around tasks? Is there going to become augmentation around our roles and the work that we do? Talk us through kind of your thinking around that and what you do at worxogo. How can AI help leaders, and how can leaders remove the fear, of their people and on their teams around, you know, the AI replacement, displacement aspect, as people are worried about their jobs.
Absolutely. And we all are. John. And in fact, one of the things we've seen in this conversation of replacement, and I'll share some stats with you. Uh, there's a study which says, by 2030, 90 to 100 million people will get displaced because of AI. And that same study says that there are going to be 117 million new jobs that are going to come up because of the way we are going to have to now use AI you know, uh, in our processes. So remember the example. I mean, just literally we're talking about AI note takers coming in. We used to do those notes at the end of the meetings, right? That was a thing that we did. But from a workplace perspective, now we just have one more tool that's been layered on, saying,
Mhm.
hey, so now we've got seven meeting summaries coming to us as an example at the end
Mhm.
of every call. But we still need to make sense of all of those and then do the tasks or agree on what are the next steps with our teams, etc., etc. So one of the roles for managers now is about having the right conversation with their teams about how uh, AI is obviously going to change the nature of our work for most of us, but it's actually going to make us think differently about what good looks like for us as well as for the team. So we will have an AI coworker or a co-pilot or something of that sort with us, but that essentially makes us more productive and focusing on things that we could not do earlier. As an example, in worxogo, we ran a so we have close to about 300,000 employees today using our tool, John. And again, this is 11 countries globally. And what we see is there's one example of a it's a 500 member team, 3 countries, and literally that process runs around the clock, John. So in this, I'm just giving you a live example. Uh, and we've been, this worxogo tool's been deployed for the last 8 years. The shift that we've seen in the nature of work, and for the frontline team, the ones guys who are doing the work,
Hmm.
is now they have AI tools who are taking away some of the manual repetitive tasks that they were doing.
Right.
So their role has now shifted from being the doers to being the evaluators of the X% of that tasks that they were
Right.
doing by the
Hmm.
automation. And so now, so zero jobs have been lost in this team, as an example. But the nature of every individual out of those 500, 400 of those people now have to mentally reorient to becoming auditors. I'm using the word loosely auditors, but you got to do the work, but you also got to audit an output that's coming in, which
Quality
earlier.
control. Yeah. Yep.
Exactly. So,
Yep.
and that for for them, it's a very big shift. So, like you said, from the beginning of time, with the wheel, fire, all of that, right? We had to change the way we were doing things. It's literally the same thing that's happening. We've seen this and I'm giving one team, we're seeing this across thousands of teams. For the frontline teams, it's about reorienting yourself, and there'll be different ways you'll do it. For managers, though, we're finding this very fascinating thing, which is because because of the worksogo nudge coach, their ability to be more personalized with their feedback to every individual has gone up 3x, which means a manager, if I'm a manager handling a team of 10, earlier when I'm doing a team huddle, I literally have very little time to talk to each one and give respective feedback. Today, we are seeing that they're doing 3 times the number of conversations because the the part of the managerial job, which was about compiling, collating, analyzing what my team is doing, is now a lot of it is being done by a tool for them. So
Hmm.
now they can actually, in some ways, be more human with their teams and have more personalized conversations. So it's changing. I don't. There will obviously be a reorientation of jobs, but I think it's going to be for the better as long as both managers as well as frontline folks use it in a way that you kind of move with the times and get better with what it does.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think it's definitely going to require a mind shift adjustment. It's going to require us to look at our roles differently. It's going to require us to shift how we do what we do. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm not concerned that my job is going to completely go away, but there's going to be certain things that I used to do that I'm not going to do anymore. And there's going to be new
Correct.
aspects that will have to do as I evaluate, the automation to ensure as audit quality control, and then to build off of and leverage, the tasks and the outputs that the automated systems produce. And so that augmented piece, having the augmented systems to help me be more productive and have more, um, you know, outputs and to springboard, my own creativity and those sorts of things are all, things that I'm looking forward to. I think it's really something that can help us move forward. So, who knows how things are going to continue to progress, but I'm optimistic for the future. Well,
Yeah.
Anant, I note the time. I need to let you go here in a minute, but as we wrap up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word for today.
Great. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can look at our website www.worksogo.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Anant Sood. Like I said, there's a link for my newsletter as well. It's a fun and irreverent take on what's happening in the workplace today. So it comes out once a month. I encourage you all to have a look at it. My final uh, thing that I'd say is, y- it's almost like getting on the roller coaster. We can be scared about how it's going to change, or get ready, strap in, and be ready for a fun ride. So at WorkZogo, we're seeing a lot of that happen on a day-to-day basis. But I think as we move along, I think it's going to be more positives than negatives that happen for all of us. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the ride and seeing where it takes all of us.
Awesome. Awesome. And thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Anant and his team at worxogo can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.